It's the Sick Podcast, CF Montreal Talk. I'm Marinaro, and we are live right now on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter. Follow us. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's absolutely free. Tell your friends about it. And subscribe to our Twitter handle at SickPod, CFMTL. It's another game for CF Montreal as they play host to Orlando City SC. Orlando City coming off a 2-0 win versus the LA Galaxy. The good news for Montreal is they're coming off a 2-0 win at Sporting Kansas City. As a matter of fact, CF Montreal is coming off of 2 straight MLS wins. As a matter of fact, if we count the win over the Vaughan Azzurri in the Canadian Championship, CF Montreal has now won 3 straight games. Can they make it 3 MLS wins in a row versus Orlando City? We'll talk about it coming up as well. It promises to be a special night in Montreal tomorrow night on Saturday night because they're going to honor one of their players, a blast from the past, Patrice Bernier. Joining us coming up, my partner in crime. Sometimes it hurts to be associated to this guy, but he's probably saying the same thing about me, but he is a good guy. Believe me when I tell you that. Jeremy Filosa coming up.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to the Sick Podcast. CF Montreal Talk.
Here's the chance. They've got the goal. Absolutely incredible. Cameron Porter delivers the goal to send Montreal Impact into the CONCACAF Champions League semi-final.
The sickest CF Montreal podcast. It's gonna be sick.
All right, I believe this is the second time that we've decided to go live with the Sick Podcast CF Montreal Talk. And joining me right now, Jeremy Filosa. What's going on?
How's it going? I like live, man. It gets me riled up. I'm ready.
Yeah. I like live too. I like talking soccer, of course, and talking CF Montreal. And you see the way I talked about you too. I said my partner in crime. Sometimes he gets me in a little bit of trouble, but he is a good guy. Believe you me.
It's like wrestling in the old days. You know, sometimes you got a tag team partner, but every once in a while you feel like shellacking him one. You know?
Yeah. No, I understand that. You know, I almost sometimes with you, Jeremy, because you could be controversial. And by the way, so can I. Not controversial. You say what you think. You say how you feel. You talk about it, and then sometimes, it bothers some people, right? And because, you're my co-host here on the Sick Podcast, CF Montreal Talk for most of the time. I'm almost guilty by association at times, right? I feel like Michael in The Godfather. You know, just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in. All right, okay. Look, we can be totally transparent here. There haven't been a ton of developments at practice this week. There have been some injured players who came back. Some came back, some didn't. But Hernan Losada says, once again, the injured players, do not expect to see them tomorrow night.
Yeah. So listen, I mean, he wasn't that clear, but from the information we're getting, that's exactly what's going to happen. The only thing he did confirm is Pantemis is not ready yet. And this is a little bit worrisome, Tony. I'm going to tell you why. It's because of the stretch of games that's coming up. Now, it's going to be 5 games in 15 days. I think they're going to play every 3 days. So you would have liked to have seen in tomorrow night's game, a few of those players come back. May it be Milovic, may it be Kyoto, may it be Pantemis. If you can get Milovic in there for 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, Kyoto, same thing, then you're going into that game on Wednesday in Toronto knowing that you have a few other weapons, a few other options. Now you might have to go into that game in Toronto with these guys maybe being dressed for the first time in a long time. And that's not reassuring in a big game that you're going to want to win in Canadian Championship in the middle of the week. So it's a little bit unfortunate that we still have to be patient with some of those guys.
Still got to be patient with some of those guys. At the same time, once again, I saw something earlier this morning, and I believe it was Giuseppe Campanelli that tweeted out that the latest player availability report remains at 7 injured players. You just talked about Pantemis, who's the goalkeeper, of course. Quizera, and Pantemis is a shoulder. Quizera is a hamstring. Lapalainen is his left leg. Vilsaint is his right leg. Piet is the adductor. Toy is the knee, Kyoto is the right leg. You know, it's in terms of Vilsaint. I mean, I heard what happened, but it's now several weeks out with a right leg injury. As a matter of fact, he got kicked in the leg in training by one of the younger players who was actually called up, and it's quite a bit of time now.
Yeah, it's been a while for some of these guys, and the thing is, we have no news on Vilsaint. That's the worst part. I mean, we know Milovic is training, we know that Kyoto's training, we know these guys are close, but for Vilsaint, it's like he was dressed for a few games at the beginning of the year, didn't get any minutes, then just disappeared. We haven't seen him since. Hopefully, slowly but surely, he starts coming back because you're going to need all these bodies.
Yeah.
There are going to be so many games, and then don't forget, after this sequence of games where you're going to be playing every 3 days, don't forget that the Nations League will be starting sometime in mid-June. You'll have the Gold Cup in the summer, the Nations League or Leagues Cup coming up after that. So there are going to be so many games that you're going to need all these bodies.
Yeah.
And, it's like the stock market. The injured list is like the stock market. You think, your list is going to get short by the next week, but then somebody else gets injured. So, we're just crossing our fingers and hoping that they can keep this stretch of wins alive until some of these big pieces come back.
Well, I'm going to tell you this. His injury, it's somewhat of a blessing. Let me explain. Yes, I totally understand your point. And yes, everyone would like to see him play his first minutes with the club. At least I would. And I'm sure he does too. But at the same time, here's a player that, once again, of course, I've been saying this. I've known him ever since he was like 9 years old. He was always fairly tall, very lanky, skinny, and over the last couple of years, but now especially with this time away and not playing, you have a chance to work on your body. And I saw a picture of him somewhere on social media a couple of days ago, and he really got thick, which will make him more ready for this league. This league it's a different league. It's a different animal.
Physical league.
We know that it's more of a physical league. It's more of an athletic league, not quite like England or Germany yet, but more so than some other leagues in the world. And so the blessing in disguise is that when you're not playing, you spend more time in the gym, you spend more time with the weights and all that stuff. And I'm sure that based on the pictures that I saw, it looks like he's filling out, which is a good thing for him. We are going to have, by the way, a tactical analysis, which we're going to, if all goes well here, pardon me, Coach Laurent Klein will join us to provide a tactical analysis. And I came across his work actually on Twitter. And I was impressed by his tactical analysis and breaking down the opposition to the point where I said to him, hey, I'd like to get you on the program. And he said, sure, I'd love to do it. So if all goes well, we're going to introduce him to the Sick Podcast in maybe just a couple of minutes to talk about how Orlando will set up versus Montreal and how they attack and maybe how they defend and how Montreal should attack them. So we're going to get to that as well. We're, of course, going to talk about Patrice Bernier. We're going to do that later on in the program as well, as he is going to be the latest inductee into CF Montreal / Montreal Impact's Wall of Fame. Jeremy, once again, though, before we do, a rather quiet week at practice.
Yeah, quiet week at practice. I mean, Lozada obviously doesn't want a lot of information to leak. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe one or two of the injured players surprisingly end up in the 20-man lineup this week. He doesn't give a lot of information out. There are a lot of practices that he prefer to do behind closed doors. The talk this week has been a lot about Choinière and the fact that, he's been dominating. He's been on the All-Star team for 2 straight weeks. Lozada talked about the fact yesterday that it's clear that, Choinière's dominance on the field right now is directly linked to the fact that he's playing his own position. position number 8. This is the position that he was brought up in. And all this talk about Swiss Army knife and blah, 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 blah. That's all good when you're a young player and you don't have a fixed position because there are other guys occupying those seats. But at this point in time, Tony, I think we should be done with that. I mean, unless you're in a really tough spot where you're missing players at a certain position.
Correct.
You just need somebody to fill a hole for 1 week. Fine. Otherwise, don't touch anymore.
Jeremy, a Swiss Army knife comes into play in 3 different scenarios. Number 1, you have many injuries on your team. So you're going to need to take a guy who's comfortable playing several positions and probably have to play him at another position if a player is hurt at that other position. All right. Number 2, a Swiss Army knife is valuable and useful if your team isn't very good and you're not very deep. And number 3, a Swiss Army knife, maybe if you have many games in a short amount of time and because you have to recuperate some players and maybe give them a breather at a certain position, maybe you take a player and you move them around. Because they have been able to add depth to this roster for several reasons. 1, by adding Bryce Duke. 2, by adding Ariel Lassiter. 3, by bringing back Gabriele Corbo. 4, by getting their injured players back. So because the injured players are returning and because they were able to add reinforcements, you don't have to go with the jack of all trades right now. And the jack of all trades usually leads to the master of none. And it's good to be able to play different positions, but I don't like players changing positions all the time because they're never going to end up getting better at their position of preference if they do that. Matthew Choinière, I always said, that of all the positions, I thought he was probably better as an 8 because he wasn't overly offensive. He's not overly defensive. He's somewhere in between. He's a good mind in the midfield. And I think that's the right chair for him. I really believe that.
Now, the challenge for Lozada is going to be over the next couple of days, weeks, with all these games that are going to be piling up is, I want to see Hernan Lozada, and this, I talk about this often, not fall in love with certain players. Meaning, I'm going to give you an example.
Yeah.
Let's say Pierre is ready to come back in 10 days. Okay. Yeah. I want to see that rotation. I want to see Wanyama come out every once in a while. I want to see Piet go in. I even want to see Choinière get a little break every once in a while because in this league, and it cannot be specified often enough, okay? It's not how you start, it's how you finish. And if you want to have energy in the tank at the end of the year, you have to make those rotations. It's extremely important at the beginning of the year not to fall in love with certain players and say, I'm playing this guy every 3 days, no matter what, because these guys are going to end up with nothing left in the tank at the end of the year. So this next stretch is going to be very important. I thought Wilfried Nancy did an outstanding job last year rotating and basically giving everybody the confidence and saying, you got to be ready to play every 3 days or every 7 days because you're going to be in there and we're going to count on you. And they always pulled out 1 or 2 or 3 players out of the lineup, replaced them by other guys, and most of the time, it's still stuck. And that's super, super important. I want to see what they're going to do with that.
All right. Speaking of playing, how is Orlando City going to play? How do they play? What is their formation? How will they attack CF Montreal? And how should CF Montreal attack them? It's now time for tactical analysis with Coach Laurent Klein. Laurent, good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen. How are we?
Very, very well. How are you? Welcome to the Sick Podcast, CF Montreal Talk. I see the board all set up. All right. Based on what I saw versus the LA Galaxy, Orlando City set up in a 4-4-1-1. Is that the formation of choice for them, or does it vary?
It's one of their formations, certainly. They've actually most commonly played the 4-2-3-1 this season, but in the 2 of their last 3 games, in fact, they've actually used a back 3, a 3-4-2-1, and I actually expect them to use that shape against Montreal to match our formation and try to counter us 1v1. All
right, okay, so how do they attack?
So they're very comfortable in build, 3-2 shape and build. They use 5 players, as you can see. They kind of have this 3-2 in the middle. They're very comfortable passing the ball around. They take their time. They're patient. But when it's time to get into the final third to start attacking, it's very direct. It's a long, direct ball, usually into feet. They like building up play in a wide area of the field and then switching it far across to an attacking fullback or to a winger who's very wide on the touchline. So it's very slow. It's intricate. And then when it's time to go, it's very direct into feet. They like playing in the air too.
This is a style of play that has caused Montreal difficulty. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. Versus Vaughan Azzurri, the long ball that went over Camacho. I know they didn't score on the play, but Montreal was in danger there. The long ball versus DC United, actually from the start of the second half, that it goes back. The keeper comes up, he boots it downfield. Benteke drives 3 players to him, is able to touch it off, and then there's another back pass, a shot, the post, a rebound, the goal. Players like Camacho, players like Waterman, they have difficulties with teams skipping lines and teams playing long balls.
Correct. I agree. It's with some players, it's more because of their physical attributes, not being quick enough to really turn and get on the front foot and be first to that ball. Some of them, it's a difficulty winning aerial duels. Perhaps to Montreal's benefit, Orlando do like playing those long balls a bit more diagonally to the wide areas. So perhaps with the pace of Lassiter, Herrera is a little quicker. They can get on those first. It's not so much long balls through the air down the middle. It's more into feet in the middle.
What can CF Montreal's back line expect from Orlando? How do they press? How many players do they send in, and where do they press from?
So what we can expect on the ball is Orlando are going to come with a front 5. The wing backs are going to get up. They're going to cause 5 across the front. So it's going to be 5v5. So it's going to be man on man. They're going to have to win their duels. They're going to be strong. They're going to have to be on the front foot because they like playing passes into feet in between the lines. They're going to be dropping to get onto the ball. So they have to be ready to step, be on the front foot, be proactive, get towards the defenders. As far as pressing goes, they'll still press in a kind of a 4-2-3-1 shape. They'll bring 4 up the field. They look to try and split the defenders and send the play to one side of the field before kind of crunching the field. The fullbacks like to get up and contain them, and they really try to win the ball high. They're not very successful at winning the ball high. Their high recoveries are relatively low, but what they do like to do is make the opponent force them to send long balls. Just kick the ball long, get into wide areas, and their fullbacks are actually very good at recovering. They're quite quick. They can run down the wings and pick the balls back up, and they like to just recycle it into possession and kind of restart their attack.
So you said that in the last couple or 2 of the last 3, I think they've gone with a 3-4-2-1. If I'm not mistaken. Montreal predominantly likes to go with a 3-4-2-1, sometimes a 3-4-1-2, but for the most part, they like the 3-4-2-1, especially since they acquired Bryce Duke. So you believe that we might see a 3-4-2-1 going up against the 3-4-2-1?
I think they're going to try to match our formation. It's definitely not an uncommon thing. A lot of teams that don't even ever play with a back 3 like to match teams who play with a back 3 with a similar formation just because it makes the roles easier. So a team who has experience having done that recently in matches, I expect them to do that too.
All right. Okay. I you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if they go with a 4-4-1-1 on the road. I wouldn't be surprised. Jeremy, do you have something for Laurent?
Yeah, well, I mean, the question that I have is, we saw last week for the first time on Montreal side that they were starting to get, a little bit more activated on the wings. We saw Herrera contributing, Lassiter also putting balls in the box, which is something that they were not doing with regularity before that. So explain to us a little bit, how that may help them this week against Orlando, especially that it seems like they're going to pack up the middle of the box there in front of their goalie.
So I'm very glad you asked me that because I think one of Orlando's weaknesses is going to be in transition. They like to get a lot of players up the field very fast. They want to play very direct, which inevitably is going to leave gaps. And those gaps I found happened very frequently in wide areas. If we can get those long balls into the channel, we played a lot of them against Kansas last week. In fact, there was Ofor who regularly found himself with some pretty new movements. Typically, he stayed very central. Last game, he was moving into the wide areas very frequently, but especially with Lassiter and with Herrera. So we can attack, if we can recover the ball quickly in our defensive zone and attack quickly in the wide spaces, I think we can definitely cause them problems. And as for getting crosses into the box, Orlando are actually dead last in the league in aerial duel win rate, 37%. So they're not very proficient in the air. Definitely a game that 04 could be looking to get on the ball, not only in the box, but in the middle of the field, trying to win those balls, win second balls, and kind of attack from a higher starting position.
So knowing that, a big-time strategy for Hernan and Losada, and it should always be, I think, as far as 04 is concerned, to probably try and put the ball in the air more often than not. But you want to put the ball in the air to 04, seeing as they're this Orlando's weak on aerial duels.
Exactly. We know 04, his biggest strength is probably his physicality, his ability to get up there and win those aerial duels. He's working on his technicality. It's getting better. I see the intent, but if you want to use him in the way he's most efficient, definitely put the ball in the air and he'll bring it down for you.
You said Orlando likes to play long balls coming from their center backs. Other methods of attack, will they try through balls through the middle, or they're not going to try and go through the middle? They'd rather go through the wings. And talk to me about their wing backs. Are they natural wingers? Are they wing backs? What are they exactly?
Sure. So when they play with a back three, they'll always play with a back three. It'll either be 3 center backs, or it'll be 2 center backs and a left back or a right back who drops and stays back while the other one pushes up. Normally the right back pushes up. It's typically the left back who stays back. When they play with a back three, their right wing back is going to be a natural left winger who can play right wing, left wing back, and right wing back. So he's very attacking. So he's going to struggle a bit defensively, but definitely get up the pitch and attack. The wide center backs of their back three, or the wide players of their back three, will pretty much be doing all the ball progression and won't be coming from the central center back. And they'll pretty much always be playing either into wide areas where they don't really look to cross. They look to work the ball back in through passing combinations and triangles. Or if they're playing into the middle, it'll be a direct pass to feet to the strikers. So just a couple of stats. They have 42 progressive passes per 90. That's 7th in MLS. And they also have 36 passes into the final third per 90. That's 5th in MLS. So it really shows that this team is looking to build early in the game and fire balls into the attacking third very progressively.
Maybe just one last question. You know, this team is built with a lot of players from Central America, South America. What does that mean? What are people going to see on the pitch that's going to be different than what maybe we usually see from other MLS teams?
Listen, they have a good amount of flair, but they also have a good chemistry. One thing I noticed is that their rotations are incredible. They're very comfortable rotating a position. You won't find it uncommon to see the 10 playing on the wing, the striker dropping, a 6 or an 8 from the double pivot, moving up onto the wide or into the central positions. They're very fluid. They have good chemistry. They move around a lot, which can be dangerous for a team. If we're trying to play a bit more of a man marking style, we might get dragged around and spaces might open. So we have to stay compact in our zone and just defend properly.
Tactical analysis with Coach Laurent Klein. You can follow him on Twitter. As a matter of fact, I'm going to retweet his tactical analysis, and from there you can give him a follow. It is at number 4, Nelly's Football. Anyway, we will retweet it, and you'll be able to give him a follow. Thanks, Coach.
It's at the bottom of the screen there, Tony.
There it is. It's at the bottom of the screen. I wasn't even looking. All right, okay. I was too focused on your looks, Jeremy. All right, okay. Thanks, Coach. We'll talk to you soon.
My pleasure, guys. Thanks so much.
All right, there you have it. All right, Jeremy, it promises, I got my Ça sent la coupe t-shirt on, and obviously it's not la coupe because, but, they have a chance to make it 3 wins in a row, but it will be a party. It will be a festive atmosphere, at least I'm hoping anyway, because I know someone that we have a tremendous amount of respect for is being honored on Saturday night. Patrice Bernier will be honored into the Montreal Impact / CF Montreal's Wall of Fame. And Jeremy, this comes with a certain criteria, however. Talk to us about the criteria.
Yeah, so the first thing is, the player has to have played his first game at least 15 years ago, has to have played at least 100 games, has to have won an individual or team trophy or award, and has to have been retired for at least 5 years. So Patrice, checks all those boxes. We can say it like that. I think we all know that Patrice was going to go in at some point in time, for sure. I mean, this guy, and I know that guys like us obviously remember Morrow and Nick and John and those guys obviously that are not in yet. We'll talk about them later and everything. But for people who started following the CF Montreal or the Impact when they got into the MLS, this is the guy that they identify mostly to CF Montreal in terms of les Québécois, guys from here.
Yes.
This is the guy that people walk down the street. Patrice Bernier is one of the rare former Impact players who probably can't walk down St. Catherine Street without being stopped at least a few times by folks who want to take a picture or get an autograph, because he's the most emblematic player that we've had over the last 10, 15 years. He's represented this team and this city so well. He's a class act. I call him the Gandhi of Quebec soccer. Nobody can say anything bad about Patrice Bernier. And he always gave everything he had on the field, always had time for young fans and young players, teammates, anything that had to do with the club. We know he has the logo, the Impact logo, tattooed on his heart. So, I mean, it was a no-brainer to have him in. And I think the organization should continue to make a big place in their club for a guy like that, because they need positive players and faces like Patrice Bernier to bring people spirits up when they talk about this team.
Jeremy, you know, there's still some people that believe that if you would stop them on the street, obviously they're not diehards, right? But if you would stop some people on the street and say, who's the captain of CF Montreal? Some people will answer Patrice Bernier now, which is, you know, it's pretty cool for him.
He's been retired 6 years, by the way.
But that's the thing. When you're retired 6 years, and some people believe that. And by the way, I'm not just making that up. Right? You can go and some people will tell you that they think that. I mean, that's a little bit.
Listen, Tony. It's super important that you talk about that. Actually, I think Stu Cowan's article yesterday, I think that was the title. CF Patrice Bernier is still most recognizable Impact player in Montreal. And the reality is, when he was here, he was playing with Devayo, he was playing with Drogba. And you know, let's say things the way they are. The team was more popular at that time. More people followed the team at that time.
Well, yeah, no, you're probably right about that, which that's concerning, very unfortunately. Now, look, he's very deserving of this honor. There's no doubt about it. I know you love him. I know I love him. Patrice Bernier, c'est un vrai. He's class on the field and he's class off the field. Always represented the organization very, very well. He took it upon himself to be a great example for all those kids out there. And once again, he represented Montreal so well. He made a lot of kids dream. He made a lot of kids want to be a member of the team and the club. He made a lot of kids fans of the club. And, he's not Drogba, and he's not Piatti, and he's not Devayo, but he was our Drogba, our Piatti, our Devayo, our guy from here. And, you know, for young players that were in the academy, and Mathieu Chouanière talked about it the other day, he's like, for us, Patrice Bernier was a god. He was Soccer Quebec. So very, very deserving of the award. Having said that, we have to get to something now, which is going to be, it's going to be tough to talk about, but we'll do it anyway because we don't hide behind things. And I don't want this in any way, shape, or form to take away from Patrice, but there are others, obviously, who are worthy of this honor as well. And if we go by chronological order, if we go by the pecking order, if we go by players who have waited, and by the way, it doesn't always work out this way in sports that you go back to the player that retired a longer time ago and retire their jersey first, even though this is not a jersey retirement, right? It's being honored on the Wall of Fame, okay?
Right.
There are a couple of players, obviously, equally worthy of this honor.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, I agree with you that sometimes in some organizations, some players get their numbers retired before others. And, you know, sometimes if you have guys of the past that are sort of on the bubble, I can understand that. But we do have players that are not on the bubble. They're in the bubble. They are the bubble. You know, I think of two guys specifically, like Nick DeSantis and John Limniadis, who have all the criteria, also check all the boxes, and, you know, are deserving. I don't believe in making people wait for nothing. I don't know why we would do that. I'm a little bit, you know, I'm a little bit sad that, you know, Patrice goes in and in the city, we're not having the discussion. I'm opening radio stations. I'm not hearing the discussion. Who else is worthy? Why isn't this guy in? Should we retire this guy or this other guy? Nobody's talking about it. It's unfortunate, Tony. I mean, if this was a Canadians player, let's say Price was going in, we talk about Carey Price, and we talk about other guys that we also think are deserving and should be up there. And when's their turn? We're not having.
But Jeremy, we have to understand something, right? We can never compare the amount of hockey talk that you get in this city or in this province.
But
hold on a second.
But the talk is zero right now.
Yes,
the talk is zero.
But this is why you and I have been upset for many, many, many years, and we tell the people that we have to tell that the marketing is not what it should be. The talk of the team is not what it should be. And yes, we point fingers at the media. You do your part and more than your part. I do my little part. There are a few others that do their little part, but there's not enough of them.
There's not enough.
At the same time, the team has to look at themselves in the mirror that some of it is on them. It's a team that has not been the most ambitious club in the world. Not this year anyway. Last year, they had a great season when they had a chance to add a player to go for a championship. They chose not to. For the previous, 4 or 5 seasons before that, it was not a playoff team. So that stuff, it doesn't bode well in this city, right? And so less and less people want to talk about it. And, we talked about when they had stars, and when they had a star or two, more people talked about the team than they are now.
Yeah.
They want to build a collective. By all means,
I
that's their choice. But
this team has been around for 30 years, for crying out loud. I mean, the
people
that are working the media, they know this team has been there. This discussion should be had. It should be a hot topic right now.
But Jeremy, who in the media cares about the Montreal Impact / CF Montreal?
But if you don't, but Tony,
who cares about them?
Tony, if you don't care about the teams and the athletes in your city, go do something else. Go do something else. I don't know what to tell you.
Because they get by doing what they do, and their program directors are happy for them doing what they do, because
Tony,
there's not enough people that work in the media.
Listen, Tony, like for me,
and not enough that who love the sport.
The fact that we're retiring Patrice Bernier's number or name, putting him on the Wall of Fame this weekend, and I opened the radio and I'm listening to a breakdown of a game between the Hurricanes and the Devils. I get latched in my stomach. You capisci? It drives me bananas because I want to know in Carolina and in New Jersey, are they talking about our teams or are they talking about their own freaking teams? Can we talk about our teams? We only have 3 and we have athletes from here. There's tons to talk about. Then we put a little bit of time and effort. I don't get it.
I think maybe we should place a call to Tums or Pepto-Bismol for a partnership here, just so they can get rid of this.
But do you think that the Hurricanes defense tonight, how many shots you think they're going to... Ma che cazzo me ne frega a me? I don't get it.
Whoa.
Tony, I don't get it. I don't get it. We're the only city in North America that gives all this time to cities and clubs in other cities at the other end of the continent that couldn't give 2 craps about us, but we got to talk about their teams.
Listen, Jeremy, everyone has a different philosophy of the way they do media. Okay. Now, my philosophy was, when I was working radio, I made my show a forum for Montrealers and for fans of Montreal sports teams and or athletes from La Province du Québec. That's the way I did my show. So, did I talk NHL every now and then? Yes. Did I talk Champions League every now and then? Yes. Did I talk a little bit of this every now and then? Yes. Basketball? Yes. But it was always with the Montreal Canadiens at the forefront, CF Montreal after, the Montreal Alouettes, boxing in this city, boxing in this province, athletes from this city, athletes from this province, and that's the way I did my show. Others, they choose to break down how Carolina's 4th line is going to go up against New Jersey's 4th line.
I don't get it.
That's their prerogative, right? Everyone has their own style, and
how do we win with that?
Unfortunately, we're not a big sports city, right? So we need to show our sports teams love, and sometimes that love has to be just talking about them.
Okay. But let's say you open your radio in Winnipeg, okay, in the summer. Are they talking about the Blue Bombers or are they talking about the Ravens? You understand what I'm saying? It's like they take care of their own teams. Go to Quebec City, open the radio. They're talking about their own teams. They're talking about the Rouge-et-Or. They're talking about the Capitale. That's who they give their time to. And it's normal. Those are their teams. And I don't understand how we win doing sports radio and sports media here, talking about clubs in other cities that at the end of the day can't make us any money. I can't make money talking about the Hurricanes and the Devils. The only way I can make money is if I can make the teams here popular and people interested in them, and then my ratings possibly go up and I make a bit of money. I don't know.
The thinking that some have is that they talk about soccer, or they talk about the local team, or they talk about football, or they talk about the local team here. They probably think it's not going to draw a lot of ratings, and that's not going to make them a lot of money. And if they talk about another team in a bigger league, in another sport, that'll draw more ratings, that'll make them more money. What I try to do, and I said this before, and I'm going to say it again, is I always try to show love in terms of, when I say love, it doesn't come without criticism. It's love in terms of just talking about them. Talking about them is love. Trying to show support in talking about them, because as long as somebody talks about you, whether it's good or bad, I mean, at least they're talking about you. So what I try to do is I always try to talk once again about the Montreal sports teams and their athletes, and the teams from Quebec and the athletes of Quebec. That's it. That's the way I viewed it. Because
listen, to get back to the discussion, okay, that we're able to have, I think without a doubt, Nick DeSantis and John Limniatis need to be in. I don't know what they're waiting for with John Limniatis. He'll probably be the next one. We'll see. With Nick, it's a little bit more complicated because, he left the team a few years ago under the Kevin Gilmore era. It didn't end well. And we know that sometimes, we've seen other former players.
No, he left. He was basically, yes, he did leave, but it was either he left or he stayed there and no one paid any attention to him. And he was just staying there, twiddling his thumbs, wasting everyone's time, right?
It didn't end well. And we know that, for guys who have relationships with the club, when it didn't end well, it takes a lot of time for them to make their way back into the family, let's say. So I hope they won't extend this forever with Nick DeSantis, because we all know he's deserving. He's won as a player. He won as a coach. He won as a technical director. He's done everything he can for this organization. Then we can have talks with, for Pat Leduc. Is a Pat Leduc a guy that we should have up there? I think so. We can have also talks about guys like Diot, Doliska, who were there in the past. And the thing is with this criteria,
why don't we talk about somebody who's not a player? I know it's like less sexy to bring up, but don't you think that on that wall of fame, it would be good to have those who were like instrumental in building something here?
Listen, I think, Tony, that
you don't think that their first ever general manager, the guy who actually convinced the Saputos to invest in local soccer, Pino Azzaro, and probably the first person that he hired, the equipment manager, Mike Moretto, and Pino, who was the GM of this team when they won a championship. Valerio Gazzola, who won the first championship as coach in '94. Mike Moretto was the equipment manager for over a decade with this team. They have to have some recognition too, I think.
Absolutely. Listen, Tony, I think that everywhere in the stadium, there should be a spot where you can learn about the history of this team. You go to other stadiums in the States, a lot of them, they have a little theater inside the stadium. You walk in, it's a 12-minute video that tells you the history of the team, the championships they won, the great moments that they had. And there should be in the stadium a place where we can recognize, like you said, administrative people maybe, guys that were equipment managers, technical directors, coaches that have done great things for this organization. There should be another spot for maybe star players that won't have the numbers that you need to get into the Wall of Fame, but they mark this team, the DeVayos, the Piatti eventually will probably go in.
But this Wall of Fame, Jeremy, that has Greg Sutton and that has Nevio Pizzolito and that has Gabriel Gervais and that has Mauro Biello. Yep. This is a step forward. This was already a very good initiative of a couple of years ago.
But the thing about the thing that I don't like, Tony, I'm going to tell you. They retired Moro's number or Moro's shirt, right? Yeah. And then they didn't retire any others. It's like they started something, they didn't finish it. Moro's the only number who's up there. Okay, fine. Then they started le Club des Bâtisseurs, right? And then the Club des Bâtisseurs, what happened? It disappeared. You can't do that as a franchise, Tony. When you start something and you say, this is the way we're going to recognize our former players, then you got to keep doing it. So what have the Habs done? They have the shirts up on top. Then they have the Ring of Honor. This is the way that they honor people from the past. Okay, fine. So let's do it. But it's got to stay there. And it's got to continue. The tradition's got to continue. It can't just be, let's start something and then, I don't know. What happened to this thing that we used to have, Le Club des Bâtisseurs. Oh,
Yeah.
I don't know. We forgot about it.
The one thing, Jeremy, and once again, I think it was a great initiative of a couple of years ago with this Wall of Fame that I would change in terms of the criteria, or that we could debate, I think, is putting an amount of games on it. For me, when someone has marked your city, marked your team, marked your organization, scored big goals, the amount of games, but we can have that debate. I'm okay with them putting an amount of games on it. But, there are players who, unfortunately, are not going to be able to qualify. They're not going to be able to meet the criteria because they didn't play that amount of games, who are very important players on this team.
Yeah, but like I said, Tony, there's always a way to say we're going to have another section for those people. We're going to have another wall, which is going to recognize those specific players. Yeah. This wall here is to recognize the players that were there the longest, that gave the most time, that plays the most games, that were recognizable figures for many, many years and helped build this team to make it what it is today. So I don't have a problem with the criteria, but I do understand that we can find a way also to honor the others that have come and that have put their brick into the wall and helped us build this franchise.
In the meantime, much congratulations to Patrice Bernier and his entire family on what is a beautiful honor.
Great
capping
family.
Off what was just a terrific career. All right, so they have a chance to make it 3 MLS wins in a row on Saturday night. Jeremy, are they going to do it?
I don't know. I think maybe a draw. And a draw wouldn't be a bad thing. If they play a good game against Orlando, I think it'll be another step in the right direction. I'll tell you, a lot of teams, Tony, this year are struggling to score goals, and they're struggling to pick up wins. I've been doing a lot of games on the West Coast because I've been doing Vancouver. My God, Tony. I look at Vancouver, 7-game streak without losing, only 2 wins. And they haven't scored in their last 2 games. I look at Minnesota, 4-game winless streak. They've been shut out in their last 2 games. I think Austin hasn't scored in their last 2 games. Colorado hasn't scored in their last 2 games. A lot of teams are struggling. I think there are 7 teams in the Western Conference, Tony, that have scored 10 goals or less this season.
Maybe Ali Jerba can go open up a center in those cities, complete striker, and definitely they could use his services. All right, okay. We'll talk to you a little bit later. Enjoy the game on Saturday night.
Ciao.
For Jeremy.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast, CF Montreal Talk on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.